The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Part 3. Every night the headless horseman gallops through Sleepy Hollow, looking for his missing head. It was evening when Ichabod arrived at the house of Mr. Van Tassel. A world of delights greeted him inside. The tables were piled with cakes and pies. There were slices of ham and beef. There were dishes of plums and peaches, with bowls of milk and cream. Ichabod was a kind and thankful man. His spirits rose as he ate, and his heart filled with good cheer. The sound of music from the hall called everyone to dance. Ichabod danced with Katrina, who smiled at all his loving looks. Brom Bones sat by himself in the corner. He was silent and jealous. When the dance ended, Ichabod left Katrina. He joined a group of older folks on the porch. They sat there talking about old times and sharing stories about the war. But these stories were nothing compared to the ghost stories that followed. Most of the tales were about the headless horseman. He had been heard recently in the country. The horseman left his horse tied up in the yard of the church. Brom Bones followed this tale with his own story of adventure. He said that he too had met the headless horseman one night. Bones challenged him to a race, but just as they came to the bridge, the horseman bolted. He vanished in a flash of fire. All these stories sank into Ichabod's mind. Ichabod stepped out of the house looking disappointed. The party now began to break up. Soon the house was silent and deserted. Ichabod stayed behind to have a talk with Katrina, thinking he was close to winning her heart. But something must have gone wrong during their talk. Ichabod stepped out of the house looking disappointed. He went straight to the stable and woke his sleeping horse. It was midnight when Ichabod began his travels home. All the ghost stories began to fill his head. He felt lonely and sad. Up ahead, a small stream crossed the road. A few rough logs formed a bridge over the water. It was a great test to cross this bridge because the stream was said to be haunted. It looked like a giant monster ready to attack. As Ichabod came closer, his heart began to thump. He gave his horse a few kicks in the ribs and tried to dash across the bridge, but his horse turned to the side. It refused to cross. Ichabod heard a sound coming from the side of the bridge. In the shadow of the trees, he saw something huge and towering. It looked like a giant monster ready to attack him. Ichabod's voice trembled. "Who are you?" he asked. But there was no reply. He repeated his demand in an even more nervous voice, and still there was no answer. Ichabod shut his eyes and began singing one of his songs. Just then, a shadowy figure appeared in the middle of the road. Though the night was dark, Ichabod could make out a large man sitting on a black horse. Ichabod thought of the adventure of Brom Bones with the headless horseman. He began to ride away in hopes of leaving him behind. But the stranger picked up speed until he was right beside him. Ichabod's heart sank. He was headless. The two riders began to climb up a hill. At last the dark figure came into view against the sky. Ichabod suddenly saw that he was headless. The stranger carried his head before him on his saddle. Ichabod shook with fear. The riders raced through the woods. Up ahead, Ichabod saw an opening in the trees. Soon he saw the walls of the church in the distance. He remembered the place where Brom Bones said the headless horseman had disappeared. If I can reach the bridge, I am safe, Ichabod thought. He gave his horse another kick and dashed over the bridge. He looked back to see if the ghost had vanished. Just then, he saw the horseman throwing his head at him. Ichabod tried to duck, but it was too late. It struck his head with a crash. Ichabod tumbled into the dust. The headless horseman had carried Ichabod away. The next day, Ichabod did not appear at breakfast or dinner. Some people went out to look for him. After some time, they came upon his things. On one side of the church bridge, they found the teacher's hat. Nearby, there was a shattered pumpkin. They searched the stream, but they never found the body of Ichabod Crane. This strange event caused much talk the following Sunday. People stood around gossiping with each other. They visited the spot where the hat and pumpkin were found. They recalled the stories of Bower, Bones, and many others. Then the people shook their heads. They decided that the headless horseman had carried Ichabod away. Several years later, an old farmer brought strange news. He said that Ichabod Crane was still alive. He had moved away and become a judge. Brom Bones seemed to know more about Ichabod, too. Whenever the story of the teacher was told, he had a funny look on his face. He always laughed at the part about the pumpkin. Some thought he knew more than he would say. Shortly after Ichabod disappeared, Brom Bones married Katrina Van Tassel. A Place of Mystery. The old country wives insist that Ichabod was carried off by spirits. It is a story often told around the fire. The bridge became a place of mystery. Ichabod's ghost was said to haunt the old schoolhouse. Walking home, the plowboy often heard the teacher's voice. Ichabod was still singing in the quiet hills of Sleepy Hollow. The end.